Firstpost reports from the world's second largest continent. Hello, I'm Alyson Grange. A very warm welcome from Durban, South Africa. We get you the news and the newsmakers from Africa. From elections to climate change to innovations and opportunities. As the world's attention shifts, we report from Africa, the heart of the global south. Join me every weekday live on Firstpost. Hello and welcome to Firstpost Africa, where we get you the top stories from the continent and from across the world. I'm Alyson Grange, coming to you live from Durban, South Africa. First, let's take a look at the headlines. India and Canada agree on a new roadmap after talks between both the foreign ministers in New Delhi, with both sides noting stable progress since agreeing to reinstate ambassadors following last year's diplomatic fallout. Pakistani troops remain on high alert along the border with Afghanistan after fierce weekend clashes left dozens dead on both sides and disrupted cross-border trade. The European Union's top diplomat says Russia is gambling with war after a series of Russian drones and military jets crossed into the bloc's airspace. Gold prices hit another record high as investors seek safe haven assets after US President Donald Trump renews tariff threats against China. And about 300,000 South Sudanese have fled the country this year alone, as armed clashes intensify, marking the worst violence since the 2017 agreement ended the country's civil war. This according to the United Nations. Hello and welcome. Our top story today is from Egypt. The African nation is hosting the Gaza Peace Summit. The summit is being co-chaired by US President Donald Trump and his Egyptian counterpart Abdel Fattah Al-Sisi. Earlier today, President Trump was in Israel, where he was lauded for his efforts in ending the Gaza war. Trump's visit to Israel coincided with the release of 20 surviving Israeli hostages by Hamas. Now, let's shift our focus to the Gaza Peace Summit in Egypt. The talks, which will be held in Sharm el-Sheikh, seek to end the war in Gaza. According to the Egyptian Foreign Ministry, a document ending the war in Gaza Strip is expected to be signed during the historic gathering. More than 20 world leaders are expected to attend the Gaza peace talks, including the British Prime Minister Keir Starmer, Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni, Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez, the French President Emmanuel Macron, the Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan, and Jordan's King Abdullah II. Indian Minister of State for External Affairs Singh will also be attending this event in place of Prime Minister Narendra Modi. Now, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has said that he will not be able to attend the summit. While Hamas and Iran have opted out of the talks, Palestinian President Mahmud Abbas, who is a rival of Hamas, will be attending the summit. The summit comes after Israel and Hamas agreed to the first phase of the Gaza peace plan, brokered by Trump. And along with the US, Qatar and Turkiye, Egypt has been a key mediator in these efforts to end the nearly two-year-old war in Gaza. By co-hosting the Gaza Peace Summit, Cairo has further boosted its regional influence. Egypt has been a staunch supporter of the Palestinian cause, and it has openly criticized Israel for its war in Gaza and its treatment of Palestinians. Last month, Cairo slammed the Netanyahu government for claiming that Palestinians were voluntarily leaving Gaza City amid the Israeli offensive. Now, since the war broke out between Israel and Hamas in October of 2023, most of the African nations have stood resolute with Palestine. The African Union has been unequivocal in its condemnation of Israel and its support for Palestinian statehood, with South Africa being Israel's fiercest critic in the continent. In December of 2023, South Africa filed a genocide case against Israel at the International Court of Justice over its offensive in Gaza. Israel's top ally, the US, has opposed South Africa's genocide case under both the Biden and Trump administrations. This year, President Trump even cut financial aid to South Africa and imposed a 30% tariff on the country. But that could not deter South Africa from criticizing Israel. While welcoming the Gaza Peace Plan, Pretoria has yet again expressed support for the right to self-determination of the Palestinians. While Israel barely has any friends on the continent, despite its diplomatic overtures, South Sudan has always been a staunch ally of Israel. South Sudan and Zambia were part of 6 African countries that abstained at the first UN resolution vote condemning Israel's assault in November of 2023, a month after the war in Gaza began. Now, back in August of this year, South Sudan denied holding discussions with Israel about the potential resettlement of Palestinians from Gaza in the East African country. This followed reports of Israel and its top ally, the US, approaching African nations like Sudan, Somalia, and its breakaway region of Somaliland to resettle displaced Palestinians. Coming back to the Gaza Peace Summit in Egypt, now it remains to be seen what role will these talks play in shaping the future of Gaza and the Palestinian people. For more on this, we have with us Mekki El-Moghrabi, the international relations analyst, who is joining us live from Cairo. Welcome to Firstpost Africa.
Welcome for Firstpost Africa, and welcome for you, Alyson.
Thank you. Now, Mekki, what specific leverage does Egypt have in the Gaza peace talks? And how does its relationship with Washington and regional Arab powers impact its effectiveness in brokering a ceasefire?
The summit, Sharm el-Sheikh summit, confirmed again the leverage of Egypt in the region and it is regional importance. Not just because its borders with Gaza and the relation between Palestine and Egypt and all Arab countries, but because you need Egypt for agreement enforcement. Whatever agreement that you make it with Hamas, with Palestinians, with Israel, with any player in the area, you need Egypt for the agreement enforcement. Without Egypt, there is no enforcement. Also, the guarantees that Egypt offered to Arab countries, to Hamas, to even to Israel itself. So that is a huge role for Egypt. Also, its diplomacy and its relations with United States and European Union and other players in the world.
Right. Now, beyond Egypt, how are African nations shaping the conversation on Gaza? Are we seeing a broader shift toward African diplomacy, taking a more active role in peace efforts in West Asia?
By the way, Africa has a big role in supporting Palestinians, and something to say and to tell the world about what is going on in the Middle East. The only international document saying that Zionism is a kind of colonization was the African Charter for Human and People's Rights. So the African position collectively and individually by countries is very strong in supporting the Palestinian rights. And yes, it's true that South Africa is leading in this issue. Algeria, Egypt, others, and South Africa appeared in the case against Israel in the court or International Court of Justice, but all African documents supporting the Palestinian rights. And that doesn't mean that individual African countries, they don't show some pragmatism in having a relation with Israel, and some of them siding with Israel, but the majority of the African nations is in the right side of history regarding the Middle East conflict.
And with world leaders, including US President Trump, attending the summit and co-chairing it with the Egyptian president, to what extent can Egypt ensure that the peace framework reflects Africa's own perspectives on justice, sovereignty, and humanitarian protection, rather than being driven solely by Western power dynamics?
The best thing in Sharm el-Sheikh summit regarding Trump's and Africa, actually we need to fix and to support Trump's Africa policy. People, whether they like Trump or they don't like Trump, Trump is the president of the biggest country in economy, in power, in military. So Africans, they need to have a good deal with Trump. And the good thing in the summit that Trump now is looking to the region with the right angle. When he looks at Gaza and Palestine through Egypt and through the neighboring countries, that is better than to look through other countries or to look through small groups that supporting Israel in the United States, whatever Israel is doing, even against the United States itself. So that is a good thing happening now in the Sharm el-Sheikh summit, and that also I think that could be good for Africa, Trump's Africa policy, as I mentioned, because now Trump can look at Africa through Egypt also, through Algeria, through South Africa, through African countries, not to look to Africa through different and wrong angle. And Egypt has also a good role in African issues, not just Middle East conflict, also in Sudan. Egypt led the African Peace and Security Council and brought them together in Port Sudan, and at that time Egypt was the president of the council, and then they led solution and the roadmap of having peace in Sudan. So that could be matching with Egyptian role, that putting Trump Africa policy in the right track.
Mikey, thank you. Great to speak with you again. Thank you for being with us on Firstpost Africa.
Thank you, Alyson.
Shifting focus to the unrest in Madagascar, President Andry Rajoelina claims a coup attempt is underway as some soldiers throw their support behind the Gen Z protests that have rocked the East African island nation for more than 2 weeks. Now, troops from Madagascar's elite CAPSAT unit have joined the youth-led anti-government rallies. This is the same army unit that helped President Rajoelina seize power in 2009. The unit claims it has taken over the leadership of the military command and was now in control of all the armed forces, land, air and naval. It also installed a new army chief during ceremony at the army headquarters.
As we have observed, it was a minister of the armed forces and also the former chief of staff who conducted the handover today. This demonstrates a genuine alternation within the military institution and proves that everything took place calmly and respectfully among the armed forces.
A paramilitary unit called the Gendarmerie has also broken ranks with the government. It had been working alongside the police to control the protests, and now it has admitted to faults and excesses in their earlier actions against demonstrators. Soldiers are now seen attending rallies with protesters. In the capital of Antananarivo, They joined a memorial for those killed in more than 2 weeks of unrest.
For those who use force against the people, stop, because we, the military who wear the uniform, are rising for the people. Secondly, what we ask of the people, we rise for you. We are like brothers side by side. So we ask you to stop the looting. We rise for you, the people.
As you can see, the population is excited because Madagascar is waking up to the fact that all its leaders are corrupt. The new generation is waking up, the Generation Z, along with stakeholders and CAPSAT leaders, meaning the military.
President Rajoelina, whose whereabouts remains unclear, is scheduled to address the nation shortly. He earlier said an attempted illegal and forcible seizure of power was underway. As per reports, he has been flown out of the African nation on a French military aircraft. Neighbouring Mauritius confirmed that the former Prime Minister, Christian Nse, and a businessman who is a close advisor to Rajoelina had arrived there early on Sunday on a private flight. The protests in Madagascar began over chronic power and water cuts, but they have evolved into a broader anti-government movement, calling for the 51-year-old president to resign. The United Nations says at least 22 people have been killed in the initial days of protests, a figure that is disputed by Rajoelina, who claimed that there were 12 confirmed deaths, all looters and vandals. Madagascar has had a turbulent political history since gaining independence from France in 1960. Although rich in natural resources, nearly 3/4 of its 32 million people live below the poverty line, this according to the World Bank. Now, many blame President Rajoelina for not fulfilling the promises to solve the country's crises. Madagascar's army has a long record of political intervention. Since independence, it has backed or led several power shifts, including the 2009 coup that brought Rajoelina to power. While the military has remained mostly in the background in recent years, it continues to be a crucial force in Madagascar's fragile political landscape. How it chooses to act this time could determine the country's future direction, and we will continue to bring you all the major updates from Madagascar. And moving on to West Africa, in a tit-for-tat move, Mali has imposed visa bond requirements on United States citizens. The restrictions come in response to a U.S. decision requiring Malian nationals seeking business or tourist visas to post hefty bonds of between $5,000, $10,000, and this starting the 2nd of October. Now, the junta-led Mali has condemned the move, calling it a violation of bilateral agreements. The military government said the U.S. program breaches a 2005 accord guaranteeing long-term visa access between the two nations. It has vowed to apply the same financial barriers to U.S. passport holders under the principle of reciprocity. The military government stated that Mali has long cooperated with the United States in the fight against irregular migration with respect for law and human dignity. However, it said the new measure was necessary to ensure fair treatment of Malian citizens. Mali is among 7 African countries facing the visa bond requirement under a year-long pilot scheme introduced by the U.S. State Department, targeting nations with high visa overstay rates. Others include Mauritania, Sao Tome and Principe, Tanzania, Gambia, Malawi, and Zambia. Now, travelers subject to the bonds must pay upfront through a U.S. Treasury portal and can only enter or exit through 3 designated airports. The money is refunded if visitors leave on time, but forfeited for overstays or asylum applications. The United States justified the pilot program by citing national security concerns and data that showed more than 300,000 business and tourist visa holders overstayed their visas in 2023. But critics warn that the fees imposed on top of the standard $185 visa cost could deter legitimate travel and hurt the US tourism economy. The visa bonds are the latest in a series of immigration measures introduced under the Trump administration. Since taking office for the second term, the Trump administration has tightened travel rules for several African countries. And these include the full-fledged travel bans, restrictions on visa interview waivers, increased visa fees, and expanded social media screening. African nations are also being pressured by the Trump administration to accept deportees, including some who are not from their own countries. Several governments, including South Sudan, Eswatini, Rwanda, Ghana, and Uganda, have accepted expelled migrants in exchange for payments or political concessions. Meanwhile, Burkina Faso had all visa services suspended at its US embassy, this after refusing Washington's demand to accept third country deportees, forcing applicants to travel to neighboring Togo for a US visa. Other nations have also hit back. Chad, in June, suspended visas for US citizens in response to the travel ban, while Namibia, in April, imposed visas on non-reciprocating countries. Now Mali is joining the list, signals that more African nations are now pushing back against US visa restrictions. And our last story today is from Tunisia, where protesters are demanding the closure of a chemical factory to stop environmental pollution and rising respiratory illnesses. Last week, hundreds of residents gathered near the Tunisian chemical group's phosphate headquarters in the city of Gabes. They protested against its polluting emissions after videos were released showing children in respiratory distress at a local school. Residents stormed the Tunisian chemical group's phosphate headquarters, demanding its closure.
We're asking for just one thing, because we are suffering from several types of illnesses, just one thing, to improve our children's living conditions. We want a healthy environment for our children. We want a sea without pollution. We want clean air.
We have been dead for a long time. Today, in this sit-in, we are demanding one thing and one thing only: the dismantling of this deadly complex.
The protesters turned violent after police cracked down on protesters by firing tear gas, forcing them to move away from the site. Police chased the protesters through the city streets. Reportedly, protesters also set fire to a branch office of the complex's administration in the city. Now, following this, emergency teams were rushed to the scene to extinguish the fire. In a bid to quell the protests, President Kais Saied met with the Ministers of Environment and Energy, urging them to send delegations to carry out necessary repairs at the phosphate acid unit of the complex. But the protesters criticized the president for sending commissions to monitor the situation instead of taking decisions. The latest protests have put pressure on President Kais Saied's government to balance public health demands with the production of phosphate, which is the country's most valuable natural resource. For years, activists have been warning about the pollution caused by the Tunisian chemical group's factory, which dumps its gaseous and solid waste directly into the environment. Environmental groups have warned that marine life has been severely affected, with local fishermen reporting a dramatic decline in fish stocks over the past decade, hitting a vital source of income for many in the region. In 2017, authorities pledged to dismantle the Gabes complex and to replace it with a facility that meets international standards, acknowledging that its emission posed a danger to local residents. However, the plan has yet to be implemented. Now the residents of Gabes have urged the government to deliver its promise and to dismantle the phosphate processing plant permanently.
We have been victims of this crime for 52 years. Today, it is time for this crime to end. We simply asked for a decision to be made to immediately stop these gas emissions. But the factory continues to operate.
And now it remains to be seen how President Kais Saied's government will balance its phosphate production ambitions with addressing the growing public health concerns. And that's it on the show for today. We will see you again at the same time tomorrow. Thank you for watching, and goodbye.